In this lecture, you'll learn how to configure storage virtual machines, also known as vServers, using the command line interface with a lab demo. I'm logged in at the command line here, and this cluster has basically got just a fresh installation on here, apart from one thing, is that I've already created some aggregates. When we create the SVM, its root volume is created at the same time, and we need an aggregate for that root volume to go into. We can't use aggregate 0, that is for system information only, so we need to have our normal data aggregates already set up before we create the SVM. So let's have a look at those. So the command is storage aggregate show. And you see that I've already created several aggregates ready to create the SVM. So let's do the SVM. You know that the old name for the storage virtual machine is a vServer, and the command line still uses vServer commands. So as usual in ONTAP, whenever we want to see information about any of the components, we start with the name of the component, which is vServer here, and then use the show command. So right now, this is just after a fresh install, apart from having those aggregates added. So we've just got the admin SVMs on there. You can see that I have got the admin SVM, which is where our cluster-wide cluster management address lives. And I've also got a node SVM for node 1 and node 2, because this is a 2-node cluster. And the logical interfaces, so the IP addresses for node management, are tied to each of these node SVMs, and also vol 0 for each of the nodes as well. Okay, so that's what's configured after we do the initial setup. We can't put any user data into those admin SVMs, so we're going to need to create a data SVM before the system is going to be usable. The command to do that is, not surprisingly, vServer create. So you can see with ONTAP, the commands that we're going to be using for pretty much anything are always really similar. Like it's storage aggregate create to create an aggregate, volume create to create a volume, and so on, vServer create to create a vServer. I'll hit the question mark to see what the different fields are here. And you can see that the only mandatory field that I have is I have to give the vServer a name. Everything else is optional, so there will be defaults used for everything else if you don't specify a value. So let's say vServer create, and I'll name my vServer department A. Now I could just hit enter here and that would be created with the defaults, but normally you're going to want to specify at least the name of the root volume and the aggregate that the root volume is going to go into. So I'm going to say that my root volume is going to be named department A underscore root. And let's say that the aggregate is, and I'll hit a question mark here to see what I've got available. Let's put that in aggregate 1 underscore C1N1. Now, what the aggregate means, it is not tying that aggregate to the SVM or saying that all the SVM's volumes have to go in that aggregate or anything like that. This is just specifying the aggregate that the root volume is going to go into. But the rest of the volumes that are in that SVM, I can put them in any aggregate that I want to, as long as I allow access to the SVM to those aggregates. So I'm happy with everything there. So let's hit enter, and I can see that my SVM is being created. Shouldn't take too long. Just give it a few seconds for the job to run, and that's it completed. And if I now do a vServer show and hit enter, I can see that my department A vServer has been created. And I can see these other columns have got more information now because this is a data SVM. So the type is data. The subtype default just means that it's not being used for SnapMirror, which we're going to cover in a later section. It's running both admin and operational state. The root volume is department A underscore root. and the root volume is located in aggregate 1 underscore C1N1. Okay, so we use the vserver create command to create a vserver. Not very surprisingly, if we want to make any changes, it's the same as if we wanted to make changes on an aggregate or a volume, etc. The command for that is vserver modify, and I'll hit a question mark, and you can see the options there. So basically any of the fields that we configured when we created it, if we need to change that later, we can use the vserver modify command. Some other commands under vserver, I'll hit the question mark for that. And you can see that if we want to get rid of it, then we delete the vserver. To be able to do that, we need to stop the vserver first. We also need to remove any volumes that are associated with that vserver as well, including the root volume. Thanks for watching. If you want to get hands-on practice with NetApp storage for free on your laptop, then you can download my free ebook, which you can see above my head right now. Also check out my NetApp Storage Complete course, which will teach you everything you could possibly want to know about ONTAP. Thanks.